Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. From fresh produce to tender cuts of meat, Safeway proudly supports Colorado farms and local small businesses. You support local when you shop at Safeway or in the Safeway app.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Memorial Day weekend in Colorado means summer is here. Well, kind of. Campgrounds are filling up, barbecues are firing, and hikers are hitting the trails. So I wish you some patience if you're sitting in traffic. I'm also looking forward to pausing for at least a few moments to remember what the holiday is about, honoring those lost while serving the U.S. I'm Arlo Pérez Esquivel. Coming up, the Trump administration is creating a list of migrant children in Colorado and their locations. Why?
Armed men and women just asking whether they were in school. When was their last immigration check-in?
Then, what the big, beautiful bill means for you.
I do think there's a lot that could help Coloradans in this bill.
But it also takes aim at EVs and green energy. And we wrap up this week with some visitors from beyond the stars.
What the heck was it? You know, it wasn't very high off the ground, but it was big, really big.
It's Friday, May 23rd. Here's the news in Colorado today. Trump's administration is asking federal law enforcement officers to find and document the whereabouts of migrant children, those who came into Colorado and other U.S. states without their parents or guardians. The administration says the point is to check on their well-being, but advocates wonder if it's a veiled attempt to deport them. CPR's Allison Sherry broke the story. Allison, what has been happening with these welfare check-ins?
So these checks are part of a national effort happening everywhere. And in Colorado, immigration attorneys say they started hearing from clients it was happening here in late March, early April. Federal law enforcement officers and immigration agents were showing up unannounced at people's homes and collecting information about the people there. Lawyers heard that this was happening in the southern part of the state first, the Alamosa area, and then it moved into the Denver metro area in April and in May.
And I just want to clarify, were they just coming into people's homes or were they hitting other locations as well?
Well, we know they were given a list of addresses every day and they had to go, knock on doors, see what they could find. But we also heard that they went to Lutheran Family Services 3 different times, both in Colorado Springs and in Denver, looking for addresses of kids placed through the foster system there who were part of the unaccompanied minor program. And in all 3 of those times, Lutheran Family Services didn't give them any information.
These were immigration enforcement efforts, right?
Well, yes. But what makes this operation so unprecedented and unusual is that the whole federal law enforcement apparatus was behind it, too. So people were seeing FBI agents and ATF agents and DEA agents at their door, armed men and women just asking whether they were in school and are they doing okay and, when was their last immigration check-in, which lawyers say was obviously frightening. And I want to make a bigger point about federal law enforcement and priorities. Every single day, the Drug Enforcement Administration and the FBI have to make decisions about where they're going to put their resources, what crimes are they going to solve, what are they going to tackle today, white-collar crimes, burglaries, fentanyl. And the fact that there were so many, dozens and dozens of agents out for weeks canvassing in this effort to find unaccompanied minors and make a database about them, speaks to this administration's priorities on immigration enforcement overall.
Can you give me a sense of scale? How many children are we talking about in Colorado?
Colorado received thousands of kids between 2015 and 2024, according to the federal data, and that peaked at about 1,700 kids in 2024 alone.
How are the communities responding to these check-ins?
Well, the attorneys for these children for weeks had to assure their clients that nothing was changing. They just needed to go and, answer the questions and everything was fine. And then they'd have to call the federal agents or the federal, Homeland Security investigations and say, I heard that you were checking on my client. They're representative. They're not a victim of human trafficking. You didn't need to do that. So it took a lot of weeks of going back and forth on this. And some of the lawyers were saying it felt disorganized overall, that they were checking on people who already had some sort of status. They were granted asylum or they were legal permanent residents and they still got the knock on the door. So, I think they were kind of feeling like it was a little bit of a disorganized effort too.
I want to focus on the why. Let's talk more about what exactly the Trump administration wanted to accomplish with these checks. You tracked down a government memo outlining the policy that targets unaccompanied minors. What does it say?
Yeah, it was a directive from ICE to other law enforcement agencies. ICE told me when I asked about this effort that this was all about human trafficking, that ICE cares about the welfare of children. But that memo that we obtained outlined multiple motives for this effort, including targeted immigration enforcement. The memo said that they were to create a database of current locations of unaccompanied minors, that they were told to see if any of the kids were registered in schools. They were instructed to also determine whether the kids are complying with responsibilities in immigration courts, whether they've committed criminal offenses, that sorts of thing. Those are all preludes to deportation. I talked to one lawyer at the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, Ashley Harrington, who said that this focus on unaccompanied minors was a little head-scratching because, the Trump administration's stated goal was to deport criminals. And most of these children have had multiple checks and multiple people responsible for them, so it doesn't make a ton of sense.
CPR's Allison Sherry, thank you.
Thank you, Arlo.
Colorado's Republicans lined up to support the large tax and spending bill in Congress yesterday. It includes several things of particular interest in Colorado. Watching it all unfold this week, while we were all sleeping, is CPR's Washington reporter, Caitlin Kim. Hey there, Caitlin. And first of all, thank you for whatever caffeine you had to inhale to bring us this news.
This news was brought to you by a lot of Diet Coke that I drank this week. As you mentioned, it has been an especially long week. And look, the House passing this package is a big step, but it's still not a done deal yet.
Yeah, thank you for that caveat. Caitlin, you were there watching the Colorado delegation through this process. What did you see?
The Republican side was interesting because it really reflected the challenge Speaker Mike Johnson faced in getting his caucus behind the bill. You have representatives like Lauren Boebert, a far-right conservative who wanted to see structural changes to Medicaid and the full repeal of a Biden-era climate tax and health bill. Then on the other side, you had more moderate or politically vulnerable Republicans like Jeff Hurd and Gabe Evans. Now, they both wanted to preserve tax credits that incentivize clean energy for producers.
And as Hurd told us, he was against deep cuts to Medicaid.
Right. So that's what Republican leaders were trying to manage, the competing priorities of different members of their caucus. And again, they also have a very slim majority, so Johnson couldn't afford to lose a lot of votes. Now, there is one fun unifying fact after all this, though, and nerd that I am, I'm going to tell it to you. After this vote, every member of the Colorado House delegation, regardless of party, has at some point now voted to increase federal deficits, federal debt, and lift the debt ceiling. And to be clear, this bill does all three.
Caitlin, you're in public media. You're in good hands with us nerds. So what's in the House bill that's particularly relevant here in Colorado? Let's start with the tax side of it.
As I said, it still will most likely change in the Senate, but I think there's a lot that could help Coloradans in this bill. There is an extension of the individual tax rates from the 2017 tax bill, an extension and small expansion of the child tax credit to $2,500 per child, and a temporary end to tax on tips and car loan interest rates. So here's Republican Representative Jeff Crank from Colorado Springs.
I hope people understand that it's important to the country. We don't want a tax increase on the American people.
Now, I have to stress, many of the new tax breaks are temporary. And the Congressional Budget Office found that the tax package as written would benefit top earners. And it decreases resources for the poorest Americans.
And that's definitely been a top criticism from Democrats.
Yes, it has. And I will say there are also tax-related issues that people may be disappointed to see in this bill. For example, it ends the IRS's free direct online filing service. That was supposed to launch in Colorado next year. And there's also a new fee if you own an electric or hybrid vehicle. If this passes into law, you'll have to pay an annual registration fee of $250 or $100 respectively for the Highway Trust Fund. And on the clean energy tax credits I mentioned, the Boebert side kind of won, so those will be phased out a lot faster. This could hit Republican Gabe Evans and Jeff Hurd's districts.
Now, Caitlin, in the past, we've heard a lot about how cuts to spending will impact safety net programs like Medicaid and food aid. Were there any changes there?
Yes, so two big takeaways. First, we'll see expanded work requirements for these programs, and they will be moved up faster. So they'll actually get implemented at the end of 2026. And as many as 200,000 Coloradans are expected to lose Medicaid coverage. Second, Congress is pushing a lot of costs onto states. It would be tough, though, for Colorado to make up the difference.
Our colleague Ryan Warner asked Governor Jared Polis about the Medicaid changes yesterday afternoon.
In addition to several 100,000 Coloradans losing their health care, it would raise rates for everybody else because the cost of uncompensated care, that means when a hospital can't bill anybody for care that they are forced by law to give, would be shifted onto everybody with commercial insurance.
Caitlin, were there any other Colorado-specific proposals or concerns that you were watching out for?
Yes, one big issue was language that called for public land sales in Nevada and Utah. A lot of Democrats and some Republicans worried that this would open the door to the federal government selling federal lands to states, to companies, to anyone else. And that was taken out of the final bill. And Republican Representative Boebert worked with the White House to get a tax on gun silencers removed.
Now, this question might be obvious, but Colorado's Democrats all voted against the bill, right?
Yes, all 4 House Democrats voted against the bill. And look, we'll see what happens in the Senate because some Senate Republicans have their own concerns about the cuts to Medicaid that the House approved and the rollback of the clean energy tax credits. So when the Senate is back in June, they'll start the process of changing the bill, and it could take several weeks. And it also means it could be sent back to the House. So we still have a ways to go.
And I know you'll be there to keep us up to date, regardless of how many Diet Cokes you have to consume. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you, and I fear it's going to be a lot.
If aliens visited Congress, they might also have a hard time figuring out the tax code. That might be why, according to some people, they're hanging out in the San Luis Valley. There's a spot just north of the town of Hooper that's become famous in certain circles for its tales of UFO sightings. And 25 years ago this month, 2 residents built a watchtower to give the curious-minded a better view.
We have had 304 sightings from just here.
CPR's Dan Boys visited this UFO watchtower ahead of its 25th anniversary party this weekend. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Arlo.
All right, so I gotta ask. Did you catch a glimpse of anything otherworldly during your visit?
It was cloudy,
Arlo. No.
But the watchtower's proprietor, 80-year-old Judy Messeline, you just heard her there, told me of several sightings she's had from this very spot.
The closest one was between here in the mountains and part way down. We had over a dozen people here. Everybody saw it.
This was way back in the year 2000, and to this day, the dozen or more people who witnessed it from the watchtower describe it as a full-on UFO sighting.
So what led Messeline to build this watchtower in the first place?
She moved to the area in the early 90s, and she quickly began hearing these stories, and you do in the San Luis Valley. And, there are these old indigenous folk tales about ant people rising out of the sand dunes, and the area has become famous, it did sort of in the 50s and 60s, for these unexplained livestock mutilations. But she was not a believer herself, In fact, this whole watchtower thing, it started in jest. She was joking around. But Messeline and her partner, they're ranchers, and business is tough out there in the high desert landscape at that part of the valley. So a neighboring farmer actually convinced her that this watchtower joke could maybe be more than a joke. It could be this little side hustle.
So this watchtower, describe it. What is it like?
It really is the prototypical roadside tourist attraction. You know you're there when you see the sheet metal aliens that are pointing the way, that you know you're going the right way. So you drive this dirt road there, and then there's this kind of stone dome that's a gift shop. Over that is built the watchtower itself. And then she also has this kind of a museum of artifacts.
Museum of Artifacts. Ooh, tell me more.
Oh, man, this is the prized collection. You have old newspaper articles, weird photos. And then there are the less visible aspects of the watchtower, the more paranormal parts.
Oh, what would those be like?
She said shortly after she started the watchtower, she had these two psychics show up and tell her that right on the site of her watchtower, there are these two metaphysical vortexes.
And they said that they're protected by two large beings. And if I ever needed any help, to talk to the beings. So I was sitting out front one day and I yelled, "All right, you guys, I've got to have at least 100 a week." I wasn't being greedy. And from that day forward, the people started coming in and I was able to make the money that I needed.
Last year, she said she got about 10,000 people coming during the summer, and it has become her and her partner's primary source of income for years now.
Dan, thank you so much, and I can't wait for the ant people report.
I'm on it.
The UFO Watchtower's 25th anniversary celebration is this weekend. They'll have food and entertainment. Now, the planetary origin of that entertainment, that was not disclosed. But back here on Earth, I do hope you're getting a long weekend coming up. We will not have a show for you on Monday. Whether you're in the mountains, at a parade, or simply taking a quiet moment, I hope you have a chance for remembrance and gratitude. See you on this feed on Tuesday. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop online and get $30 off your first online order when you use code SAVE30 at checkout. Get the same prices, deals, and rewards as in-store. Get started at Safeway.com or the Safeway app.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.